Hello, I'm Justice, the educator in residence at the Textile Museum of Canada, where I spend my days thinking, talking, and teaching about textile things. This residency is part of the Creative in Residence program, which has been made possible with support from the Ontario Trillium Foundation. As a creator and teacher, I love telling stories, listening to stories, and helping other people tell their stories. To me, the stories can be shared in a multitude of ways, from a favorite tattered childhood book to a tea set passed down from your great grandma. One of my favorite storytelling mediums is textiles. Textiles are a part of every person's life. Through clothing ourselves in them and furnishing our spaces with them, we express ourselves with them every moment of our lives. The purpose of Curiously Crafting is to show everyone that textiles are a wonderful way to tell stories and that they also have the ability to do so. It can be daunting to an outsider, but we are all worthy and deserving of working in the wonderful world of textiles. We can journey there in a multitude of ways and from every background imaginable. Whatever the method of learning, making, and the final outcome, we all have a right to engage in the past, present, and future of textiles. I am so thankful to be launching the Curiously Crafting project with the Textile Museum of Canada, whose mission of inspiring an understanding of the human experience through textiles resonates deeply with this project. Through its collections, exhibits, and programming, the museum welcomes everyone in the world of textiles and encourages us to reflect on our stories. A hugely important part of this project and a museum's work is to recognize the history and stories of the spaces and land we work on. I would like to take this time to acknowledge the land the Textile Museum operates on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work here, and through our activities, we seek to create a space for people from within and outside our community to share, learn, and celebrate the textile practices of today and long ago in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. With this introduction to the Curiously Crafting project, we will now proceed to our Curiously Crafting conversation with our artist of today.
Okay, I'm in a small office. It's sort of dimly lit. It's a very quaint, intimate room. I look a little bit tired, but I'm very relaxed.
Amazing.
And I just washed my face, so my face has a nice kind of slippery sheen.
So
This is
good.
kind of fun.
It is really fun.
What else can I describe? How much should I describe?
That's pretty good. I think I'd
Okay.
appreciate that I feel like if I didn't have a visual, I'd love hearing these fun things about it. So I'll talk a little bit about myself and my space. So I am in the forest. It's not actually forest, it's a tapestry that I do all my Zoom and live streams in front of. The light is quite intense. It's coming from my right side. It's the sun pouring in through the office windows, just lighting up my little woods in the background. I am wearing a black turtleneck. I have brown, I never know what color my hair is, brown hair past my shoulders, and I have glasses. And yeah, that is the spaces and way our beings are today. And then Tao, if you would like to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be super
Yeah.
groovy.
I'm Tau. My full name is Tau Lewis. I am an artist. I am Canadian from Toronto, with a Jamaican background. I work mainly in sculpture. I'm self-taught. I work with a broad range of materials that mainly have one thing in common, in that they are most of the time repurposed, either found, donated, recycled, personal belongings. And in the last 3 years or so, my process has become very textile heavy. It's partially because of the fact that I travel a lot, and as I move through different environments, fabrics are a very easy thing for me to collect, and also help me understand the place in which I'm in, and they are very easy to pack up into a suitcase and take along with me. I also make flat works. I, from time to time, work in assemblage. Recently incorporated paint into my work, but really nothing is off limits. And I'm really just interested in materials. I'm an explorer and a lover of materials and tactile things and using my hands.
So now we're all introduced. We have an idea of what this project and conversation is about. So I was thinking we can jump into the discussion. So, so my first question, my first discussion point was on how you describe your practice. So you describe that you are healing your personal, collective, and historical traumas through labor, and that you're using methods such as hand sewing, carving, and assemblage to build portraits. So, how can your work and creations lead to healing? How can we heal through manifesting and crafting our stories? Because obviously when we tell stories and someone agrees with our story and listens to it, we can feel really validated. So I'd say it follows that creating a physical realization of your story can give that similar feeling. So yeah, if you could talk about the healing process for you.
Yeah. So the main thing that comes to mind is that it's about being enveloped in a different world. And I guess in a way, taking back some control over, your surroundings, and being autonomous in what you're enveloped in. And so for me, it's very much a departure. I work in order to give myself a departure from whatever I need to, be away from. I find that very restorative, and I find that to be a very radical form of self-love. I think if we look at other art practices, to get a better understanding of this, my favorite sort of, I guess you could say, genre of art, and I've spoken at length about this, for lack of a better word, are coined as outsider artists. But a great example of one of these sort of communities is, say, the quilt makers of Gee's Bend, or the yard shows of Birmingham, Alabama. So kind of post-slavery, right up until the civil rights movement, post-civil rights movement in the Deep South, a lot of these artists and this entire population of Black folks who had been severely oppressed, had little or no access to education, were very impoverished, and took to art making as, I guess, the most the most powerful tool against that oppression, while doing it in plain sight and doing it to form almost a secret language. So these artists were making monumental artworks that would exist, outdoors, and they were made pretty much exclusively from debris or organic materials or waste. It had to be made in that fashion so that they could be undetectable as anything of value to the surrounding white community, who would often steal things, trash them, or vandalize them. And so this is a good example of artwork as a departure and artwork as a necessary, crucial part of one's existence in order to continue being, to continue living. The common thread between a lot of these practices that developed, you know, in these outsider communities or these crafting communities is that they're not just making out of will, they're making out of necessity. And you can see very clearly that it is for the purpose of serenity, for the purpose of mental well-being and just simply continuing. So this is my sort of approach to art making. It's always been about taking control, having autonomy, and thinking about what I need and how I can create that for myself, and hopefully, you know, give my audience a point of departure as well when they encounter the work.
To move on to my second point, my second question, this one's really quite straightforward. So why textiles? Like, what led you to stumble into using them, and what makes them a suitable medium? You did kind of speak to this a bit, actually, but maybe just will reiterate a little.
Yeah, they're comforting, and you know, I'm somebody who learns a lot through touch. I filter the world through my hands. So texture and objects are really important to me. And, you know, I think in part it's the textiles, but also in part it's engaging in the act of sewing, which I find extremely satisfying. I find it really empowering, just the fact that you can, there's so much you can do with fabric as a material. There's so many different ways to construct with it, and it just is such a flexible medium. And as I mentioned before, you know, you can learn a lot about a community based on the textiles and the color and the patterns that they adorn themselves and their houses with. And that's something I really love. And, you know, it's sort of, it gives me freedom. It gives me freedom in a way that I think, you know, a painter feels that paint gives them freedom.
Yeah. So this one really quite, you know, practical minded, but was how textile techniques, like learning them, came into your life. So from family, friends, or did you just go at it? Because for me, you know, my earliest textile and sewing experiences was, I was like, I don't have enough doll clothes. My civilian families need more doll clothes. They need more clothing and bedding. So I would just like take a needle and thread from my mom's sewing kit and chop up my old clothes and try and make stuff. And then I got really lucky that an old woman in my neighborhood saw my sewing attempts and then taught me on, like, she bought me an old Zinger and taught me how to use a sewing machine and read a pattern, which, so I'm really thankful that I had this like self-teaching and then also this generational exchange of knowledge. So how did it come into your life, sewing and textiles?
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay.
It's exactly the same. I also was gifted a Zinger from, I have a couple at my mom's house. I also attempted learning patterns and was not successful, as, you know, like, I don't remember how young I was when I got that first sewing machine, but I gave up on it instantly. And I enjoyed the control that I felt doing things with my hands. Things like doll clothes, making little bags, purses, things like that, gifts. It just completely like expanded my world of gift giving and things that I could make for people. You know, it wasn't just sewing, but I loved making little bracelets. I loved giving people things. And it was also just maybe a fascination with, as you said, being able to cut up an old pair of jeans or a jacket or what have you, and actively engaging in this form of transformation, which I just think is so satisfying and so good for a young person um, to know that they can do. So those are some of my early on experiences with fabric and sewing, which I think I abandoned for a very long time until I recently started using it in my art practice.
There you go, right? Some things come back to us like when they're meant to come back to us in our life journey. So thinking a little bit more about learning and places of learning, this is going to be the one where I talk about how you artists, like in the most positive way, this wonderful anomaly in our current fine arts world, because you haven't gone through the MFA journey. I haven't either yet, but I feel like a pressure to go through the MFA journey. It's just so common. So instead, it seems your learning has really come like from within, and I'm kind of assuming, but your community, like the wider community. And I'm wondering if you can speak to why you chose this method of learning. It shouldn't be a question, but I think it is important to me because I think a lot of people, and especially Canada, feel that I have to go to university, I have to go to college to validate myself, to validate what I create. And I think an amazing thing we can learn from you is like, no, your ideas are good. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely a positive thing that, the conversation is shifting a little bit. And there are less and less, I guess, gatekeepers in the art world that will hold it against you that you don't have a degree, but it doesn't come without its challenges. As terms like outsider artist, I think are becoming more and more outdated and even maybe a bit derogatory. It's not something that doesn't happen that, I get the respect that I deserve for the work that I make. But I'm not simultaneously, judged or scrutinized for not having received a degree. So it's good that things are changing. It's good that people are becoming more aware that everybody doesn't have the same path towards becoming a professional. And that's not just in art. That's, I think, in a lot of other fields of practice as well. But I think education is extremely helpful for a lot of artists. I think having a BFA and pursuing an MFA and even, pursuing education beyond that, I think it does benefit a lot of people, but not everyone. And it's not to say that I didn't try to, attain a degree, go to post-secondary education. I tried twice, and it hasn't worked out for me. It didn't work out those two attempts. And I'm not closed off to ever receiving higher education as well. I don't want to limit myself in any capacity. So I'm not willing to say that I won't ever go to school, but I also don't think it's necessary for everyone. And it hasn't been necessary for me up until this point. What's been necessary for me is like a real conviction and a real commitment to what I do, and a real, strong belief in the fact that I'm capable and that I have to work every day and that my ideas are going to work and I'm going to put the time and research and effort and energy into developing myself. I've worked so hard, and I think so is everybody who's receiving a BFA. It's about the work. It's about working and committing yourself. And I recently just learned that one of my favorite artists, Simone Lee, who's one of the most celebrated working artist in America today, she didn't get a degree either. And I think she probably had a, extremely difficult time in comparison to the way that my trajectory has gone, seeing as, she's in her 50s. But yeah, it's an ongoing conversation. It's moving slower than, a lot of us would like it to. But yeah, we can also just talk about how inaccessible
Well,
education is to, the majority of
yeah,
people in the world. So it's about a lot of things, access is a big point there as well.
Yeah. The next point I'd like to talk about is we kind of talked about it. So as makers, we're really blessed, I think, because so many people in the Western world now don't do a lot of physical stuff with their work, but we're blessed. We have this very physical nature to our work. And then there's this great thing when you talk about when you're constantly making and doing, you don't have this time to second guess yourself. So your work becomes like intuitive and the second nature. And I kind of think there's because there's doing, learning, and thinking where you're using your hands and doing, and there's like the thinking, learning, and doing where you're like standing back and thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking is really good, but it can be really easy to get caught up in like the never-ending mind loop, which is what I do all the time. And so doing can be really liberating. But I am wondering in your process how much, on this, like thinking happens before you start doing. So is there a process of how you generate your visuals pre-production, like a certain way you decide on like the colors and the shapes and forms and textures for your work?
Yeah, it's different with every body of work.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really varied. To a large degree, it does depend on the material. But it does also depend on the narrative that I'm building. I think each body of work is directly related to the last body of work. And so, it's not absent of thinking. There's a lot of thinking throughout the entire process.
Right.
I would more say that it's, very immersive, along with being intuitive during the process of making an artwork. There are just a lot of things that I have to be fully involved in and really feel out. It's a puzzle, and it's a process of feeling things out as I build, as I'm building the narrative and also the artwork, and trying really hard to just also understand the objects that I'm working with, especially, when I'm incorporating found objects or photographs or even textiles. There's so much stimulation and information that has to pass through me that I have to understand and be in conversation with, while I'm working. So it really involves my whole body, and it actually can be quite draining. But yeah, it's really different with each individual artwork and with each, body of work. Yeah.
There we go. Amazing. So that's normally the answer though, is like there's no one way. It's just like it just depends on each one, which is a great lesson that, there's no, don't expect to do things one way your whole life in your creative practice. Yeah. So this one's really big for me, and I think was like one of the things I really thought of, like what I like, this is a really big thing I want to talk about with Tau's practice in the Curiously Crafting series. So one interview I watched of yours, it was the flare one, actually. That was fun. It was a good one. So you were talking about how when people interact with your work, they're okay with this temporary discomfort because it's a really good point for them to become interested, and they're drawn into this larger story of your creations. And it made me think of how there's often an incredible discomfort in the creative and learning process because you have to face your shortcomings, you have to face that you might not succeed in the way you want, and you're taking your own story, your own idea out of your head and putting it into the world where you can't control anymore how people see and understand it. So I'm wondering if you think that most people are okay with this, or is this, you know, a huge problem most people face? This is my big fear, my big creative block. And then do you encounter these anxieties yourself? And if so, do you have a way of like quelling them, embracing them, or maybe they don't appear for you? Yeah.
Do you mean with regards to how your work is consumed, or just the fact of that your work is consumed?
I think that's part of it, but also I guess the discomfort of, you know, in creating and in learning, you have to accept that like you're not perfect, like you're never, like you have so much to learn always, and creating something that is not like your perfect vision. Maybe that's the discomfort I think I'm speaking to, but both are good. Both
Yeah. I mean, that's what art is for, you know, for the maker and for the viewer. It's supposed to open you up. It's supposed to give you the opportunity or invite you to be vulnerable. You know, we make art, I think, to express ourselves, and there's nothing more vulnerable than that. And I think, you know, you don't have control over how somebody consumes and digests your artwork, but you just can hope that they would be open to receiving it, and receiving it however they need to on that given day, you know. But yeah, like, what is art supposed to be if it's not allowed to make you uncomfortable?
So the opposite of discomfort was, I was going to talk a bit about comfort. Now this is a little different because as I'm engaging in conversation, I'm learning more about your practice. So some of these questions I feel do answer themselves, or my question should change, but I'm gonna like go on ahead. So I was gonna talk about a bit about the comfort that can potentially be found in the materials you choose. So I was wondering if you ever find that found materials like bring a lot of comfort, because I was thinking, this is very practical, but a large part of the fear, I think, of failure in textile arts is it's really, really labor intensive, and it can be really financially draining with the, you know, materials we use. So because you have all these long hours going to creation, and your labor costs are like the labor you're putting in is really significant. But since you're using all these found materials, I'm wondering if that does take away a lot of the financial stress, since you're not, you know, it's not like a $2,000 piece of fabric. And I was going to ask you, because I was like, did it start as a thing of I need to save money, I need to use what's available, but or was it driven by a thematic decision? But I think now that I've heard more about why you use found materials, I can see it is thematic, but was it also ever a financial thing at the beginning?
Yeah, so that feels like a three-part question.
Yes, very complicated. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's a combination. I think I've never looked at it as I don't have enough money or I don't have enough. I try not to ever approach anything in my life from a lens of scarcity. Rather, it's the opposite. I do have enough. I can, I will, I do. So at the beginning of, you know, any kind of exploration, be it assemblage or fabric-based works, what have you, it's always been about just simply using what's there, using what's available, understanding the things that I have in my studio and why I've, you know, been compelled to archive those things, and then consider how I can implement them into the work or make with them. As for, you know, the hours that go into the work, I don't find that there's any significant, you know, obviously like material costs are smaller, but because of what I do and the way that I work,
Oh no, we got a little.
You know, my hours are very precious. My hours are really precious, and I make around 15 artworks a year, you know, whereas a painter who spends a monumentous amount of money on paintbrushes and oil paints can sometimes produce, you know, triple or quadruple that amount. So yeah, I haven't experienced life as a painter, so I can't speak too much to that. But I do believe, like, if anything, it's just put into perspective how precious my hours are, and that I think it's visible, you know, the hours that go into the work, and that makes the work more precious in a way. And as for the object, the found materials, I'm not sure that it's comfort per se. I think that they bring a sense of familiarity to the work that a lot of people, upon viewing them, can readily identify with. It helps to ground the work in our atmosphere. But, you know, what happens in my body when I'm collecting those things is more so a sense of wonder and curiosity, because I don't get to know the history of those things, and I don't get to know their purpose or their function a lot of the time. And so that just leads me on this amazing kind of journey. And it, you know, it opens me up, it makes me curious, it makes me fascinated. It gives me a sense of excitement. So yeah, I hope that answers the.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. This is great. I'm gonna quite change the topic, and I'm gonna talk about your mentorship that you've been recently engaged in, because this is where I found out the world is both really big and really small, because I found out there was like kind of a connection between the two of us, even without Curiously Crafting, because you've been mentoring my friend Gigue, who I know through ballroom. Not going to explain ballroom here, but I'll probably link it in the blog we do about this so people can learn about it. And I've known him for, you know, a good while. We're not super close, but we're in the same ballroom house. And he's just someone who's like takes every type of like educational learning opportunity and every creative opportunity, and then like just pays it back into the community so much. So you two are doing this like mentor and mentee relationship, and that's with the Art Gallery of York University. Yes, got my notes here. And I'm curious why you've chosen to take on the role of being a mentor, and if you've engaged in a mentor-mentee relationship on either side before, and what you think mentorship can offer as a mode of learning and teaching. Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, I've taken it on before in both roles, but never in a formal sense, never in a structured sense. But I would say that I've had several mentors, and I would say that I've mentored several artists. The reason why I was interested in participating in Lead Time is because I think it's a very smart program. And I really applaud the AGYU for the way that they have developed it. I think there are a lot of institutions that are really just scrambling to do any kind of real work for artists of color, and, you know, are kind of caught in the middle of wanting to take a step back, but also, you know, needing to be involved. And Lead Time gives us both resources. So Gigue and myself both have resources from them, but we, you know, we're free to have conversations outside of the museum, without the museum, about whatever kind of support Gigue needs from me. And I think that's a really wonderful way for an institution to encourage growth for young artists of color. And so this is a program that when I, you know, was asked if I would participate, I could really get behind. And I think it's a good thing they're doing. And I'm really happy that I did it, because I think, you know, Gigue is really inspiring. And I think the mentor should also be able to have conversations that, you know, are conducive to their practice as well, and can help them stay inspired, and can help them, you know, remain engaged. And the whole purpose of it is just to look at and understand art and talk about art. And that is a very healthy thing for every artist at any level to be doing. And I think it's very important to stay engaged with somebody who is, in a younger career than you are at every stage. And also to just pass down knowledge and help them navigate. I think we have to share our knowledge. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, it really is. Like, I think that's something like I've grown better and better at in my years of realizing, like, that person having the knowledge doesn't take away from you having the knowledge,
Absolutely
it just
not.
means you both have it. And also, like, this is why, like, I would always teach regardless of how my art practice was going, because obviously financially I make my bread and butter off teaching, not my art at all. But even if I had all the money in the world, the ideas I get from, especially when I work with children, I really love children. They're just so brilliant, and they're like, this game, I had kids once, they made a game, it was like snakes and ladders, but snakes and snakes, and it was like, wherever you roll on the board, you just got to go down the snakes, and like, they're like, it's a metaphor, and the dice for this game cost $100. I was like, this is a better critical piece of art than I've ever made in my entire life. And the snakes moved. They used little motors and 3D printed the snake.
Awesome.
They're great. I get all my best ideas from them. And like,
they'll teach you so much. They'll teach you so much about yourself. It's unbelievable.
They really do.
Yeah.
They really do.
I mean, people pay me to do workshops with kids, and sometimes I feel like I should be paying for them because it's just so, like, jaw-droppingly, informative. And
yeah. I miss it. I always say the best thing about children is they do, like, this. I'll see them do the same things I did as a kid, like all these amazing, silly little things. And then I'm like, yes, I can also do things that they do. Again, I don't need to feel like I have to be a serious adult all the time. So, and that's why I try to do things and make things be fun. Even if we have to talk about serious things, you can have fun with it. So yeah. So I guess think that I wanted to check in, see how you're doing, because we've been talking for a while, and talking can be really tiring. And I've talked about a lot of the things I want to talk about. So yeah, I just wanted to check in how you're feeling.
I'm feeling good. I feel like this has been, like a really good conversation for sure.
And I'd love to, if you wanted to, if you have anything else you'd like to say, I would very much welcome that. But also, you said so much already. I don't want to be like, give us more. But it's totally up to you.
That's okay. It's really up to you. I mean, if there's anything that you want to pull out of me, I'm here.
Oh, I feel pretty good, because the last big question I did have, I think we kind of talked about, because it was about, like, the space you create and the tools, but you kind of talked about how, because you move around a lot, you're able to do textiles kind of came because it's very portable in that. And I'd just like to take also some time to thank you. I feel so honored. I was so excited for this. And I've also looked at the instructional material you developed, and it's really amazing. So just so thankful for that. I'm going to do the project myself as well. So
yeah, it's going to be very easy for you. But it's a great way to kind of, have a little piece of an environment that's different, that can, really, really help change a space. So I hope it's, useful for people. I hope they actually implement it, because it's also very fun. But no, thank you as well. And thank you for, doing so much research and for the questions. I feel like they were really good questions.
Thank you. And I hope that people will be able to, like, from this, our conversation and the two other conversations I'm going to have, like, I really hope people see again that, like, you can just be a textile artist. It's good. Just go for it. It's super fun, actually, and super, you don't have to worry. And I tell myself I'm actually doing this whole project to remind myself that.
Absolutely.
I can just do it too, so.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to let you go because I know you're really busy, and I'm going to go about my day in Textile Museum residency. Thank you so much, Tao. I'm so happy. Thank you. Thank you. All right, toodaloo.